Nora Vale led her last cow into the crowded cattle yard with both hands wrapped around the rope, because if Mabel pulled free, Nora had nothing left in the world strong enough to bring her back. The buyers saw the cow before they saw the woman. They saw the narrow ribs, the dull winter coat, the mud dried along her legs, and they began laughing before Nora reached the auction rail. "That ain't a cow," one man called. "That's a hide waiting to fall off bones." Another shook 2 copper pennies in his palm and said, "I'll pay for the rope, not the animal." The laughter spread fast. Nora kept walking, though every step felt like it stripped something from her. Her dress was faded gray-brown, patched twice at the sleeve, and her shawl had thinned until the wind found every weak place in it. She had not come to be pitied. She had come because the hayloft was empty, the flour sack was nearly flat, and Mabel had started pushing her nose against the barn door each morning as if even the animal knew there was no feed left. Silas Crane stood near the rail in his polished boots, silver watch chain bright against his brown coat, smiling like a man who had arranged the weather. "Mrs. Vale?" he said loudly, though Nora had never been married and he knew it. "You asking a price for that poor creature, or just hoping someone will haul her away before she drops?" Nora's face tightened, but she did not lower her eyes. "She is not sick," she said. "She stopped eating the feed because something was wrong with it." That made the men laugh harder. Caleb Pike, the yard foreman, wiped his red face with a sleeve and barked, "Cows don't hold opinions on feed, girl. They eat or they die." Mabel shifted beside Nora and turned her head away from a spilled pile of grain near the rail. Nora noticed. No one else did. Silas stepped closer and opened his palm with 3 dull coins inside. "Take it," he said, "before mercy gets expensive." Nora looked at the coins, then at Mabel, and her throat worked like she had swallowed a stone. Then the laughter stopped. A tall rancher had entered through the side gate without a word. Elias Rook stood in a dark hat and weathered vest, his calm eyes not on Nora, not on Silas, but on the cow's mouth, hooves, and the untouched grain near her feet. He walked forward, took 1 gold coin from his pocket, and set it on the rail. The whole yard went still. Nora stared at the coin as if it were a trap. Silas's smile thinned. Elias looked over the crowd and said quietly, "This cow is telling the truth. Question is, why are all of you afraid to hear it?" She did not reach for the gold coin. That surprised the yard more than Elias Rook's offer had. Men who had laughed at her a moment earlier now stared as if poverty had no right to hesitate. Silas Crane gave a short breath through his nose and said, "Girl, if a rich fool wants to overpay, don't insult fortune by thinking." Nora kept 1 hand on Mabel's rope and 1 hand closed at her side. "I asked for a fair price," she said, her voice low but steady. "Not a man's pity tossed where everyone can see it," a few buyers muttered. Caleb Pike leaned against the rail, squinting at Elias. "You buying her cow or making a speech?" Elias did not answer him. He picked up the gold coin and held it where Nora could see both sides of it. "I don't pay gold for pity," he said. "I pay when something is worth more than the room understands." Nora's eyes flicked from his face to Mabel's lowered head. "Then say what you saw." The demand moved through the yard like a thrown stone. Women in Nora's position usually thanked, bent, and left quickly before kindness changed its mind. But Nora stood with her chin lifted and dust on her cheek, asking the most powerful cattle buyer there to explain himself. Elias stepped closer to Mabel, slow enough not to frighten her, and crouched near the grain scattered beside the rail. The cow sniffed once, pulled back, and pressed her muzzle toward Nora's sleeve instead. Elias pinched a little grain between his fingers, rubbed it, then smelled it. His expression did not change, but his eyes hardened. "How long has she refused this kind of feed?" he asked. Nora swallowed. 6 days after I bought the first sack from Crane's store." Silas laughed too loudly. "Listen to that. Now I'm blamed because a starving cow grew choosy." Nora turned on him before Elias could speak. "She ate creek grass. She ate dry cottonwood leaves. She chewed fence bark before sunrise. But she would not touch your feed after the second morning." The laughter weakened. Elias looked at the cow's hooves, then at the rough line of her ribs. "And she walks better on open ground than in the pen?" Nora's hand tightened around the rope. "Yes." For the first time, Elias looked directly at her with something sharper than kindness. "How did you know to watch that?" Nora's answer came after a pause. "My father taught me cattle speak with what they refuse." Silas's face changed, just a little, but Elias saw it. So did Nora. Elias turned toward him and asked, "How many ranches did you sell that feed to?" Silas Crane did not answer Elias Rook's question in the cattle yard. He only smiled at the crowd and said rich men often grew dramatic when a pretty face looked hungry. Some men laughed because laughter was easier than choosing a side. Nora felt the insult land, but she kept her hand firm on Mabel's rope and did not give Silas the satisfaction of seeing her flinch. Elias paid the gold coin into her palm, then said he wanted to test what she claimed before sunset. Nora nearly refused. A man with money could make a poor woman look foolish in more ways than one, and she had already been made small enough for a single morning. But Mabel stood beside her, tired, thin, and stubbornly alive, and Nora knew the cow had been warning her long before any man cared to listen. So she followed Elias out beyond the auction pens, past the last storage sheds, to the edge of his grazing land, where the grass thinned near a dry creek bed. 3 ranch hands came with them. Caleb Pike trailed behind, pretending he was only curious. Silas did not come, but Nora saw one of his clerks watching from the road. That worried her more than Silas's laughter. Elias stopped at a low fence and gestured towards the pasture. "Tell me what you see." Nora hated the test in his voice. She stepped through the gate anyway. "Your herd stands too close to the cottonwoods," she said. One hand snorted. "Cattle like shade." Nora looked at him. "Not when the better grass is open and clean." She walked farther, eyes moving over hoof marks, chewed stems, broken weeds, and the dark line where water had once held in the creek bottom. She knelt, pulled a bitter weed from the trampled grass, and crushed it between her fingers. They should have left this alone unless hunger pushed them back to it. Elias crouched beside her. "Bitter grass?" "Mixed with mold from old feed," she said. "One makes them turn away. The other makes them weak before they know why." The ranch hands stopped smiling. Nora led Mabel to the patch. The cow lowered her head, sniffed, then stepped back hard enough to pull the rope tight. Nora did not smile. She only looked at Elias. "She has been telling me the same thing for days." Caleb Pike rubbed his beard, uneasy now. "Could be chance." Nora walked to a crushed strip near the fence and kicked loose dirt aside. Under it lay a torn feed sack, half buried, marked with Crane's store stamp. Elias picked it up slowly, and behind them, from the road, the watching clerk turned and ran. Elias Rook held the torn feed sack in both hands for a long moment, and the silence around him felt heavier than anger. Nora watched his face, waiting for him to deny what lay in front of him, because men with land often defended other men with business before they defended the truth. Instead, Elias folded the sack once and looked towards the road where Crane's clerk had vanished. "This came from the same store," he said. Nora gave a hard little breath. "You needed a stamp in the dirt to believe what my cow already showed you?" One of the ranch hands shifted, embarrassed. Caleb Pike looked away. Elias did not rebuke her. He deserved the words, and they struck him clean. "No," he said quietly. "I needed courage to say I should have listened sooner." That answer unsettled Nora more than pride would have. She wanted to distrust him because distrust had kept her standing when kindness was scarce, but his voice carried no performance for the men behind him. He stepped closer and handed the feed sack to Caleb. "Keep that safe." Then he turned to Nora. The gold coin was not for the cow alone. Her fingers closed around the rope. Then what was it for? Elias looked across the pasture, where several of his cattle stood dull-eyed near the fence, chewing without appetite. For the truth she carried? For what you noticed before my foreman, my riders, and I did? Nora felt heat rise behind her eyes. Not from gratitude, but from the old humiliation of being believed only after damage had spread wide enough to touch a rich man's herd. "My father noticed things too," she said. "Men called him old-fashioned. Crane called him a fool who saw ghosts in grass." Elias's jaw tightened. "I heard those things." Nora turned toward him slowly. "Did you repeat them?" The question cut deeper than accusation. Elias looked at the ground before answering. "I did not stop them." That was enough. Nora pulled Mabel's rope and started back toward the road. "Then find another woman to help clean your mistake." Elias did not grab the rope or block her path. "You earned the coin whether you stay or leave," he said. "But if Crane used the same feat against your father, then this is not only my ranch's trouble." Nora stopped. Her father's name had been buried under debt, whispers, and empty barns. Behind her, the pasture wind moved through bitter grass like a warning. She turned back, eyes wet but steady. "I stay for my father," she said. "Not for you." Before Elias could answer, a rider came hard from the ranch sheds. "Mr. Rook," he shouted, breathless. "Someone cut open the feed sacks, every one of them." By the time Nora reached the ranch sheds with Elias, the feed room looked as if a storm had gone through it, though the sky outside was clear and hard blue. Sacks lay split from top to bottom, grain spilled across the floorboards, and the sharp, sour smell rose so fast that even the men at the doorway pulled their scarves over their noses. Nora stepped inside before Elias could warn her back. She crouched near the nearest pile, touched the damp clumps with 2 fingers, and rubbed them apart. Mold showed pale green under the cracked grain. Mixed through it were dry stems from the same bitter weed she had pulled near the creek. "This was not ruined today," she said. "It was hidden today." Elias stood behind her, quiet, but his silence had changed. It no longer tested her. It waited for her. Caleb Pike leaned in the doorway, face gray now instead of a red. "Crane sold half the county from that stock," he muttered. "Said it was strong winter mix." Nora looked up. "Strong enough to make cattle weak slowly. Slow sickness gets blamed on weather, breeding, bad hands, poor owners." Her voice almost broke on the last words because she heard her father in them, sitting at their table years ago with his hat in his hands, saying the animals were not wrong, only the men who fed them. A sound came behind the shed. Elias moved first, but Nora caught his sleeve. "Wait." She pointed to a trail of grain dust leading under the side door. "Whoever cut these sacks dragged one out." Elias opened the door, and they followed the trail to a wagon track behind the storage shed. Silas Crane stood there, with 2 men loading a final sack onto his wagon. He did not look startled. That made him worse. "You were on private business ground," Silas said smoothly, though his eyes fixed on Nora, "and you brought the girl who poisoned her own cow for sympathy." Nora felt the old fear rise, the kind that wanted her to step behind a man and disappear. Instead, she walked closer to the wagon. "Open that sack." Silas smiled. "You giving orders now?" "No," Nora said. "I am giving you a chance to prove me wrong in front of witnesses." Caleb took 1 step forward. Elias took another. Silas's smile thinned as the yard foreman cut the sack open. The same sour grain spilled out, mixed with bitter stems. Nora lifted 1 handful and let it fall through her fingers. "My father did not lie," she said. Silas's face hardened. "Dead men do not win arguments." Nora turned toward Elias, not asking for rescue, only room to stand. Then Silas pointed at her and raised his voice toward the gathering hands. "Remember this moment, boys. By morning, every ranch in town will hear she planted it." By morning, Silas Crane had done exactly what he promised. His words reached the cattle yard before Nora did. Men leaned against rails with folded arms, watching her as if poverty had suddenly become proof of guilt. Someone had chalked "cow poisoner" on the side of the auction shed, and though Caleb Pike had scrubbed half of it away with a wet rag, the ghost of the letters still showed in pale streaks. Nora saw them the moment she stepped through the gate with Mabel's rope in her hand. Her stomach tightened, but she kept walking. Elias Rook moved beside her, tall and silent, but Nora did not let him walk in front. If she hid behind his coat now, Silas would win without proving a thing. Silas stood near the rail, in his polished boots, clean coat, and bright watch chain, looking rested, as if lies gave him better sleep than truth ever could. "There she is," he called, "the woman who blamed Honest Feed because her own cow was failing." Murmurs rose. Nora felt each one like grit under the skin. Elias's hand flexed at his side, but he waited because she had asked him to. Caleb Pike stood near 3 feed pans placed on the ground. 1 held clean hay from Ruth Bell's barn. 1 held Crane's winter mix. 1 held grass and weed pulled from the Bitter Creek line. Nora had arranged them herself before the crowd gathered, because this could not be only a rich rancher's accusation. It had to be plain enough for every doubtful man to see. Silas laughed when he noticed the pans. "A circus trick," he said. "Animals eat what hunger tells them." Nora looked at him. "Then let hunger speak." She led Mabel forward. The cow lowered her head to Ruth's clean hay and took a slow mouthful. Then Nora guided her toward Crane's mix. Mabel sniffed once, jerked her head back, and planted her hooves hard enough to pull the rope tight. The crowd quieted. "She knows that smell," Nora said. Silas waved a hand. "1 trained cow proves nothing." Elias turned to his men. 2 weak cattle from his own herd were brought through the gate, ribs showing under rough coats. They moved toward the clean hay, then refused Crane's mix the same way, snorting and turning their heads aside. Caleb Pike stared at the feed pan as if it had spoken aloud. "I saw Crane's men mixing old sacks under new," he said, voice rough. "Last month, behind the shed." Silas swung toward him. "Careful." Caleb lifted his chin. "I should have been careful sooner." Nora stepped toward the rail, heart pounding, and faced the men who had offered pennies for her last living hope. "My father saw this before any of you," she said. "He said cattle do not lie, but men who profit from sickness do. You called him foolish because Crane told you to. You called me desperate because I was poor enough to be easy." No one laughed now. Elias removed his hat. "Thomas Vale was right," he said. "And so is his daughter. Silas backed away from the rail, but 3 ranchers moved to block the gate. For the first time since Nora entered the yard, every man watched Silas instead of her. Silas Crane tried to leave with his dignity first, then his anger, then finally his body when neither of the first 2 would carry him through the blocked gate. The ranchers who had trusted his winter mix stood in his path now, not shouting, not laughing, only looking at him with the hard quiet of men counting dead cattle in their heads. Caleb Pike took the silver watch chain from Silas's vest and held it up. "You always liked showing this," he said. "Maybe the judge will like seeing what it bought." Silas spat near the dirt and said no court would hang a business on one girl's cow and a few spoiled sacks, but his voice had lost the smoothness that once made men believe him. Elias stepped forward with the torn sack from the creek line, the ruined feed from his shed, and Caleb's written statement folded in his hand. "Then we will bring more than 1 cow," he said. "We will bring every rancher who lost stock after buying from you." Silas looked at Nora then, and for the first time, he did not see a poor woman with a rope in her hands. He saw the person who had noticed what money had hidden. That frightened him more than Elias's size. Nora did not smile. Victory felt too heavy for that. She only touched Mabel's neck and whispered, "You told them, girl." By afternoon, Silas was under guard in the back room of the yard office until the sheriff could take him to town, and the men who had offered pennies stood around Nora with their hats in their hands, each trying to find words that would not sound as cheap as their coins had. She did not make it easy for them. When one buyer said, "We did not know," Nora answered, "You did not ask." When another said her father had been a good man, she looked him straight in the eye and said, "Then speak it when it costs you something." Elias heard every word and did not interrupt. Later, inside the yard office, he placed a proper contract on the desk instead of a gift. It named Nora Vale as grazing advisor for Rook Range, paid in monthly wages, with authority to reject feed, move herds, and train any hand willing to learn. Beneath it, Elias had written a separate statement clearing Thomas Vale's name and admitting that his warnings had been ignored. Nora read every line twice. "And Mabel?" she asked. Elias's mouth softened. "Still yours." Nora picked up the pen with a hand that trembled only once. "Then this is fair payment," she said, and signed her name where every witness could see it. Weeks later, she walked ahead of Elias across clean grazing ground, Mabel moving slow and steady beside her, the herd following a safer line she had marked with willow stakes. Elias rode behind instead of leading, because some lessons had to be learned with humility. At the rise, he removed his hat and looked toward the valley where Crane's store stood, shuttered and quiet. "Your father would have known this route," he said. Nora kept her eyes on the herd, but her voice was clear. "Now they will know who taught me." Elias nodded. No promise of marriage passed between them, no sudden claim, no soft ending that turned her hard-won place into another man's reward. Only trust, earned step by step, and a woman no longer selling her last hope for pennies. That evening, when the cattle settled on clean grass and Mabel lowered her head to eat, Nora stood with the gold coin in her palm, then pressed it into a small frame beside her father's name in the ranch office, not as rescue money, but as proof of the day men finally learned to listen. Nora knew the cow was telling the truth before any man believed her. Would you have trusted her warning at the cattle yard, or waited for proof? If this story stayed with you, like the video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to Echoes of a Rancher for more emotional frontier stories about dignity, trust, and quiet courage.